Mark chapters 11 and 12 capture a deliberate assault on the religious status quo. These aren't the instructions of a mild-mannered teacher. They are the actions of a man systematically dismantling a system that had become hollow. The descent begins here, at the Mount of Olives. The crowds are shouting, "Hosanna," a word that served as a specific, desperate cry for help. Save us now. They were demanding a political liberator to overthrow Rome. The crowd is cheering for a conqueror, failing to see that the kingdom Jesus is bringing is not interested in replacing one human empire with another. He has arrived to confront the corruption of their own worship. The next morning, Jesus approaches a leafy fig tree, finds no fruit, and curses it. The following day, it has withered to its roots. This was an acted parable, a tradition where prophets used physical objects to demonstrate spiritual realities. The fig tree represents Israel and the elaborate religious institutions centered in Jerusalem. The withered tree mirrors the fate of the temple itself. Jesus is signaling that any religious system displaying vibrant foliage on the outside while lacking spiritual fruit on the inside has lost its purpose. He enters the massive courtyard of the temple, overturning the tables of the money changers and effectively halting the commerce that powered the sacrificial system. He declares they have turned a house of prayer into a den of robbers. The Greek word for robber here is lestis. It describes a violent brigand or an armed insurrectionist, rather than a common thief. A den of lestis is a fortified hideout. Jesus is suggesting the temple was no longer a place of worship, but a stronghold where institutional exploitation was being masked by religious activity. The cleansing of the temple was a targeted strike. It established that God rejects worship built on the systemic exploitation of the people. The religious leaders respond with a trap, asking if it is lawful to pay taxes to Caesar. If he says yes, he betrays the people. If he says no, he is a rebel against Rome. Jesus asks whose icon, whose image, is stamped into the metal. The answer is obvious: Caesar's. He tells them to give back to Caesar the metal bearing his likeness. Since the empire minted the currency, the empire has a claim to it. But the second half of his answer is the radical claim: give to God the things that are God's. If the coin bears Caesar's image, Genesis says humanity bears God's image. God's claim isn't on our money, but on our entire existence. Jesus moves the debate from tax policy to identity. He settles the question of allegiance by pointing to the image stamped upon the soul. In the final confrontation, a scribe asks Jesus to identify the single greatest commandment in the entire law. Jesus identifies the core of the law as agapao, a willed, self-giving love for God and neighbor. This isn't an emotional feeling. It is a commitment of the will, persisting regardless of sentiment. Mark highlights this definition by showing a poor widow who drops 2 lepta, tiny coins worth almost nothing, into the temple treasury. While the wealthy were giving large amounts from their surplus, Jesus notes that she gave her bios, her entire livelihood. In the autonomy of the kingdom, value scales with the depth of the sacrifice. Real devotion is measured by the proportion of trust it requires. Throughout Mark 11 and 12, Jesus peels back the layers of a religion that looks impressive but lacks internal substance. We are left with the same question the crowds faced: what fruit remains when the religious performance is stripped away? The story of the widow suggests that God isn't checking the raw volume of our religious activity. He is looking for the kind of trust that manifests when we have nothing left to give but ourselves. This is a call to a love that costs us everything, modeling the love Jesus was about to demonstrate on the cross. Read the full, in-depth reflection on the Substack to sit with these questions today. We'll be back tomorrow to continue the journey.